Hey there, welcome to the sixth video in the six-part series we're doing with Launch Factory. In this video, I interview Yilan Shi. She is the co-founder and CEO of Simply Independent. She's pretty amazing. You'll see in the video her background and her life story that she shares with us. She's on an amazing mission, and I think she's going to achieve some amazing things with Simply Independent and for Launch Factory. So I'm really excited to share this interview. Having said that, if you have any questions for myself, for Elon, or for anyone at Launch Factory, my email address is on screen. Please feel free to reach out to me directly. If you want to reach out to anyone at Launch Factory, their contact information is on the page. So please reach out to them also. I'm excited. Let's get into the interview. Elon, thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm really interested in learning about your experience with Launch Factory and what you're doing with your new startup. But let's start with a quick introduction. Tell me about yourself and about your background.
Yeah, Deval, thank you for interviewing me and for having me. Before joining Launch Factory, I was in the process of obtaining my PhD at UC San Diego. My thesis was on CRISPR-Cas genome engineering, which is, I'm sure it's over the news. Jennifer Doudna just won the Nobel Prize. So I was working on a variation of that platform. And even though my academic background is quite divergent from what I'm doing right now, which is consumer tech, I've always been really interested in startups and entrepreneurship. And in fact, I entered my PhD all the way back in 2017 with the intention of perhaps spinning out a company, a startup in the biotech field, through my PhD thesis. Nice. I eventually, ended up in a similar path, maybe in a different domain, but, I felt like as a scientist, you can definitely make a big difference in the world, especially gene therapy. It's very self-explanatory, the impact on people's lives, on patients' lives. But what if I could do that in a more immediate way through consumer tech? And I've been interested in consumer tech, and I think that's why consumer tech really attracted me. So I was like 2/3 of the way done with my PhD, but I have been aware of Launch Factory and their business model and how they support entrepreneurs. And I felt like it was a really great opportunity, especially for first-time founders, because you have an ecosystem. Whereas normally founders, you would have to have a successful exit to build that ecosystem for yourself. So that's definitely what initially attracted me to Launch Factory.
Fantastic. So did you finish your PhD?
Good question. I did publish, but I did not finish my PhD.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you did publish your thesis though.
So I published a project,
Okay.
but I was, so there's a couple of things that happened. Actually, in 2019, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. It's autoimmune arthritis. And that was in the middle of my PhD. And I was still, intending on finishing, but that was actually a cataclysmic event for me. I felt like, okay, well, I could finish the PhD and I could start a startup, but you only have one life and there's only such limited time. So I was still in my PhD, but I was thinking, can I make the impact I want, maybe in a faster way? Because, your career span is only so long. And when you have a chronic autoimmune condition, it makes it a little bit, it shortens up the timeline a little bit. Shortens up your own runway, just like a starter's runway. So I actually was searching for some opportunities, and I really like Launch Factory's model and how they support entrepreneurs. Right. And when we were accepted, I made the decision to take a master's and switch to being a full-time founder. So that was, it was actually a personal drive that really motivated me. And I, particularly was attracted to the customer segment, how we can serve customers for Simply Independent, because there were other business ideas and opportunities, but I was very particularly attracted to Simply Independent.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that story. That's amazing. And I have my personal sort of reasons why I sort of understand wanting to make every day count, right? And that's amazing. So now let's talk about how you you said you already knew about Launch Factory and their mission and how they were sort of starting companies, but then you sort of actually entered the recruitment process and what that was like. how you learned about it and how you actually entered. Let's talk about that story a little bit.
Yeah, so Launch Factory has a very meritocratic and I would say novel recruitment process. I would say the recruitment process is part of their product, if you see Launch Factory as a startup as well, in that they really level the playing field. They don't require you to have certain network or certain pedigree. They really just judge you on what you can do today, right now.
Right.
And the recruitment process is structured to filter, I guess, for teams that have the ability to execute, and that we can pivot if we need to. And they're really at this point, I would say in the early stages of a startup, you're always investing on the potential of the team and on the crew, because the movie might change, the idea might pivot, and that's good. That means that you're understanding the customers. So I really like that model of not being married to the idea, but filtering for a team that can survive with any idea in any market condition. It resonates with my own personal and professional story as well. So I enter that. The process is very rigorous. So for the year that I was early in 2020, it was about an 8-week process, and every week they have a time deadline where you have 48 hours to complete an assignment. And that's actually, I shouldn't say assignment, because that's very, it's a misnomer.
Yeah.
I would say in each of the 8 weeks, you're building a part of your company that you intend to join. So I see it more like an audition process for casting a saga. You're like
Right.
the director and the producer now have the resources and have an infrastructure, but they need actors who can really perform in any situation, rain, wind, shine, sunshine.
Right.
And they're, casting like a 5-10 year long TV series, a saga,
Yeah.
and that is going to affect a lot of people. So I see
Right.
it that way.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, let's dig into the actual process a little bit, those
Sure.
8 weeks, and the projects that you were given, and the different sides of the business that they sort of force you to develop, which is such a fantastic thing, right? Because a lot of entrepreneurs don't necessarily have that structure. So let's talk about that a little bit. What were the 8 weeks like, and the projects?
Yeah, so in 8 weeks, you do have to have formed a team at first, and Launch Factory encourages you to either draw from your own network, or if you don't, they still give you an opportunity to pair you up with people with complementary skills. And they have, and I believe this year that's even, with that process has been beefed up more. But basically, you and your team go into it, and week 1, they actually just test you on whether or not you know about the dynamics of startup funding. So an example project is break down the cap table and how it's going to be diluted for each successive round of funding, and obviously present it in Excel, present it in like a kind of like a due diligence investment memo if you were at an angel investment firm or a VC company. So it's very much like you are creating the company that you're going to fund, but you're also evaluating it from a third person perspective. And that work is always divided up between 2 people over 48 hours. At the beginning of the 48 hours, you know what your assignment is or what your goals are, and then you have a deliverable at the end. For example, week 2 was user persona. And some of us, some teams did even interview customers. So they really encourage any sort of background or tools or materials or kind of like a very creative, like entrepreneur mentality of how to get these. And it's nothing you can't find it on Google. It's not something you can look up, right? It's not like market research that you can purchase third party. It's really, it's the most meritocratic process I've ever seen. And so week 4, let's say, so I'm talking about market.
Let's talk about the first 2 weeks, because
it's already a lot.
There's a lot going on
yeah.
here. I think just that first week, figuring out your cap table and what it's going to look like as you grow the company, I think is such an important thing. And a lot of entrepreneurs totally miss this, and they realize that by the 3rd fundraising round, they're left with 20% of the company. So you don't want to be in that situation. So first of all, let's back up. You want to step further, and how did you team up with your partner? And then how was that first exercise? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so Launch Factory introduced me to my partner for the FRP process, and I was really lucky we had complementary backgrounds. And then the way we do it is that we just, we talk about what our backgrounds are and what we're comfortable doing, and we divide it. It's very much, I would say it's very much it's very much like dating, right?
Yeah.
It's very much like dating. It's about complementary, but you are at the end of the day, it's a team. I would say no, it's more like marriage because you have obligations and duties, and your child is the deliverable in a way,
Yeah.
or your family, and it's obviously important to be considerate of what preferences are, but at the end of the day, it's about finding a partner that takes ownership. And I was very careful to, and I think my founder as well, she's like very aware of the things at stake, and we take a lot of ownership. I do think that whatever background you came in with is gonna be a big determining factor in those early weeks. If like if unless you really cram or something. So I have a year and a half of venture capital experience. So I knew what cap tables are. I was on this due diligence team for companies like 23andMe. We did follow founder. We're not the original founder, but I've been, I've seen the decks and the pitch decks and the financial modeling, the financial data of companies like 23andMe, Carta, Pinterest, Spotify, so some of those companies, obviously in later stage funding. But so it was very fun for me, but I'm not sure, if that could be translated, if everyone else have that feature.
So your partner is Jennifer
Kahn, Dr. Jennifer Kahn.
Dr. Jennifer Kahn, great. So first of all, I think that's a perfect analogy that, the 8 weeks is almost like dating, and then once you are co-founders, you're married. So when you guys started the company, you're both obviously co-founders, but you took on the role as the CEO, and she took on the role as the COO. Is that right?
Correct, yeah.
Perfect. And for functional reasons, I think that's so important, that making sure you have all of those bases covered. And so that first exercise really sort of, you start to learn about each other as much as the project. And your VC background, obviously, it's fantastic. So as you go into the second week, what was that? Now you guys sort of know each other. Now, what was that progression like?
It was, I would say, for each week that I was with my co-founder partner, it got easier, right? It's like the process. Again, I've just been really lucky, I think, throughout my PhD and now, that I've just found really incredible people who are talented and experienced in their own fields. And I think also because I've done a lot of other marketing business internships, and I lived in multiple countries, I think I always try to understand something from their perspective. For me, the role breakdown of CEO versus COO or CTO even is purely so that when it's 12 midnight, who's going to finish that? And it's just to break up all the things we had, the surface area of what we have to do, so there's no confusion. But a lot of the high level decisions, especially financial decisions in big business, it's never a go unless we both agree, and that was established throughout the FRP. Obviously, other companies and other executives manage their teams in a different way, and that works amazing for them. I also think for Simply Independent, because we're dealing with a very sensitive population, seniors, and understanding their needs, that was something, being just a good listener, and that's something intrinsic that we need to master anyway, so why not start with our own team so that we can serve customers better?
Right. No, absolutely, that's perfect. And so by second week, you're sort of now, you've been dating for a little bit now, so let's continue the progress. What was week 3, week 4 like, and what were the exercises? By the way, just so people can visualize this, you're actually coming into the Launch Factory offices and working here, so you're working literally side by side, right?
So here's the thing, in the beginning, so this year is unique in the sense that when we started the recruitment process, COVID hit us immediately.
That's right.
But for the first couple of weeks, we were working, I was meeting at a coffee shop with my co-founder, and what Launch Factory encourages us is to always be working together as much, well, you have to, but to encourage that group dynamic. By the second to the last week, so when you make it to the finalists, the top 3 finalists for each company, they are invited to come in and pitch traditionally. But this year, everything was over Zoom.
Got it. Yeah, this year was 2020, so
unique. We have the data.
Unique, right?
Yeah.
So okay, let's go back to the story. Week 3, week 4. What was that like, and what were the tasks assigned to you guys?
And that might be a little bit out of order because I'm pulling this out of my memory.
Sure.
But we had to have a user persona, and we had to have a branding image, which I thought was interesting. And it was totally opposite. It's like week one, they kind of, I think it was like a little bit of a, in undergrad, you have those filter classes. Like half the, everyone, their mom wants to be a pre-med. I was a pre-med too, so I can make fun of myself. And then they switched to poli-sci after the first minute, right? Which is fine. And that is totally okay. I switched out of pre-med, so I can make fun of myself. So that's a little bit of a weirder in the sense that, hey, this is real. This is not just a classroom activity. It's real funding dollars. We are, depending on your company's resting on our shoulders. So just to make people realize how serious it is. In the second week, we did user persona, and I love that because it allowed us to know our customers. You can do a lot of secondary due diligence by reading published papers. So for Simply Independent, we went on reputable sources like MIT Age Labs. There's a Stanford Longevity. So those secondary sources, nobody, and some teams, they're very creative. They actually reached out to customers or geriatricians. So, for your customer segment. So you created customer personas of who you would sell to and what their pain points are. And we literally created like a little pictogram, and then we also, it's week 3, I believe we did market analysis. So your regular TAM, SAM, SOM, whatever the associates, and entry-level analyst, what I did for a year at University Growth Fund. And that was a lot. I would say the skills for that project was management consulting, VC, and that was, it's interesting because I think I've heard, when we're doing we do a group meeting kind of with all the teams every year, and you see that those teams drop off. It's intense, but makes it real. But some of the other teams were asking questions. I think like, can you purchase it? Can you buy it? And that was made really clear that it has to come from your own analysis, right? Because you can't just buy or outsource yourself. Why would they want to hire you?
Right, exactly. So, what's your value add to the process?
Exactly. Or what's your understanding of the market, right? And you might discover, so here's the thing, Launch Factory has done, I would say 80% of this before. So they know, they define the market, they outline a problem statement, but it's still up to you to build the exact MVP, find your go-to-market strategy, your beachhead, and find how to target your customers and actually do it, right? Which again, going from theory to execution. I actually think that's the fun part, right? A Launch Factory is kind of like, they point us in the right direction, but we're the actors and actresses on stage who are going through the door, and it's fun, but maybe not everyone thinks like that, right? That's my personality, and that's my team's personality. So yeah, that was week 3, market analysis.
Fantastic. No, that's great. Let's keep going. Week 4, 5. What were the other some of the other tasks?
Yeah, and again, this is definitely out of order. But I'm just so if you go on the web, because if you go on last year's website, it's out of order. Don't count me. But totally we did market analysis. Okay, we really focus on our go-to-market strategy. I remember the 2 markets are 2. So the difference between market analysis and go-to-market is the difference between an MBA and a founder. No judgment, but with an MBA, you do back-end due diligence. You see how big the market is, and then you sub-segment the market by either geography or maybe market penetrate, like traction. Maybe your MVP has a market size because you have less service offerings. It has a 1/10 of the size of your SOM has 1/10 of the size of your TAM, something like that, right? You can, and it's a little bit arbitrary, right? But it's like proving a mathematical theorem. If you can explain it, it's true. Yeah, and then so with go-to-market strategy, again, this is where you are transitioning away from academia, and even the cap table, you can technically learn it on your own. You just kind of go on YouTube and just put on your headphones for 24 hours. But it's going much more away from academia and the well-trodden path to how do you become creative, how do you become tactical, how do you, I guess the word hustle, which I don't like that word, but how are you tactical and practical? Or go-to-market strategies, how are you going to reach your first 100 customers? What if your first 100 customers say no? What are the regulation barriers in your particular industry? If you want to go into healthcare, telemedicine, and all, which we could explore it, but that's not our MVP because because maybe there's too competitive of a landscape, maybe the market is too fragmented, or because maybe you don't have quite the software infrastructure because somebody else already built it, like Teladoc, So that's your go-to-market strategy. Going from 100 to 1,000, how are you going to market to them? Exactly. We're not going to, the type of company who spends money on ads, right? Because we're not some kind of legacy company or assisted living. We are a startup, and the essence of a startup is creating something from nothing, going from 0 to 1. So how do you leverage? We do leverage social media a lot, content marketing, and word of mouth. So defining that out, and that starts to get into a little bit of financial planning, So that, I would say week 4 is when it starts getting really serious. And that was for me, for our team, was the transition between academia, MBA, and project
Yeah.
to how do you act if you're the true entrepreneur.
Yeah, this is such an important like thing for a lot of entrepreneurs to realize, because I have an MBA, so I went through business school and I sort of learned the basics. But when you're starting a company, it's such a huge difference. It's night and day, right? And understanding that right up front. And I'm guessing, with the survival model where, the teams are starting to drop off, week 4, week 5 is probably when you start to really see big changes, because a lot of entrepreneurs can't really make that shift. They may have the academic mindset, but when you go to the real world, it's a whole other story. So let's keep going. This is fantastic. What were the next steps like? And also, let's talk about the broader group, how it started to shrink.
Sure, I did. Just one thing to add to what you said, transitioning from class to entrepreneur, and I think people who are more comfortable in being a manager and in like sort of a classroom setting, they still have value add, but maybe it's more appropriate for them to come in as a manager when the startup is more mature, like after the first 2 years. And that's hard, right? It's so hard to find a team, maybe not necessarily one, but a team that can take you from 0 to 1 and then 1 to nth.
Right.
So anyways.
Right.
But yeah, going forward. So after that, I would say that's when the weeks started getting really intense, both in terms of expectations and in terms of the filtering, because at this point you mainly have weeded out the people who are in here because they're curious and not because they're truly hungry.
Right.
You got to have that, I don't want to say starving mentality, like you don't want to be desperate, but you got to have that extreme. You can't just have talent. You got to be a little bit obsessively hungry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree with that.
Yeah. And then expectations started getting higher. I would say in the first 3 weeks, my team was hitting top 3, and they do tell you the rank. I mean, especially if you keep going, right? Even if you don't, your rank. If you keep going, they generally tell you where you fall. And so throughout the process, James Harrowford was responsible for the operational side of the entire FRP process. And I would say that was really important to me to put he is a co-founder of Launch Factory, but also to put a face to the entity. And I learned new things from him, and I felt like my team and myself improving every week. So I told my founder at that point, I told Jenny, I was like, hey, regardless of what happens, we're still going to come out better and smarter, and because this is literally a mini MBA and we're doing it for free. So I told her, and I told myself that too, because I think that's when the competition started getting really intense, right? And it's like you want it, but you don't want to psych yourself out. So basically details after that, it was a lot of we did product. We did basically you was go to market. So how we're going to go to market, and then what we're going to build. I think for Simply Independent, we were unique in the sense that our problem statement was helping seniors age in place. Now we all know that is you can't build a product around just that one statement, right? There's still so much more to be done to define our beachhead and our first product. So we did so much due diligence, and even after we were funded, we spent about like a month and a half doing that. But that's when we realized, okay, there's so many ways Simply Independent can do, and there's things that look good on paper, and there are things that are going to get us revenue really fast. So at that point, I would say we actually, Jenny and I kind of made a high-level decision. We're going to be scrappy. We're going to get to revenue in the fastest, shortest way possible with an imperfect, dare I say, ugly website or MVP or web app or mobile app, and then iterate by learning from customers. But we need to have customers. We need to have that first paying customer as soon as possible, like from A to B.
That's
so
great. And
that is one strategy. It's very much like the lean startup strategy. It doesn't make sense for every company, and there's many ways to make money, right? But for us, I think it matters because customers, they say you can get everything wrong, but if customers are paying you, you must be solving something that they can't replicate themselves, that they're willing to exchange money for. So getting to that secret sauce as soon as possible, we obsessively prioritize that. And later on we'll talk about what we're actually building So that was our strategy. We decided to focus rather than just stick with the broad problem statement.
Yeah.
We actually narrowed down. So originally, with Launch Factory's own due diligence, internal due diligence, they wanted to have a catch-all platform for companion care, in-home services, and even some light telehealth, possibly. We narrowed that down to just one service vertical, and I'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
But it was very strategic, right? Because it's about what we can carry
let's
on.
transition to that now
Yeah.
because so now you're getting to the end of the 8 weeks, and
Yeah.
now you're working on the actual company now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're starting to think about what that product looks like, and you visualize that. And so let's dig into that and tell me a little bit about the company that you're forming and what that initial MVP is.
Yeah, so I would say we didn't define our MVP until afterwards because there were still so many open questions. Because the way we had to switch from week to week, we had to cover all of our bases. So we unfortunately we couldn't just focus on product for the rest.
Right.
So let's say, fast forward a little bit, we pitched, we got a call back, and we were in. So Jenny and I went around and interviewed over 50 individual customers, and we did a lot of guerrilla marketing. So Nextdoor is a great app. We both speak Canto and Mandarin. Us combined speak Canto and Mandarin. A lot of our customer base are from Asian American populations because they have multi-generational families within one household. So that was like a great opportunity. So we did a ton of interviews, and then we interviewed more than 25 geriatricians, insurance provider, like director of insurance at Kaiser. So I would say about 75 people total. And after that, we discovered that who our competitors were, and we didn't want to go straight to market with that. So originally, Simply Independent wanted to be more of a companion care and in-home services, and that is a pain point, but as a young startup, you don't want to be like a dull knife. You want to be like a razor blade.
Yeah.
So we narrowed it down even further, and we say, how can we help seniors who are recently discharged from hospitals and who have chronic pain, but they need some kind of they need some kind of rehabilitation therapy or physical therapy. So we wanted to find a pain point that was acute and frequent and not adequately served by other startups, which is it's simple, but having those three Venn diagrams overlap is pretty hard. And we found that post hospital recovery, post-surgery recovery for senior citizens is an acute need. Not this in the sense that they need another doctor, but they need somebody to help them remain compliant to their physical therapy and help them with picking up groceries, even feeding their pets.
Yeah.
That is a definite pain point, and that is acute. Now, the only maybe downside is that, ideally, if you do our job right, they won't be constantly needing that because after 3 months, they might recover. But that is an acute enough pain point that we say we can go to market to that. We have quite a lot of confidence from our interviews and research that they are going to pay for it, and they might not be as price sensitive, right? So it's like very, because we are, in the beginning, we are doing a direct-to-consumer model because we need users and customers before we can go to insurance companies. And one of our long-term goals, even go to corporate HR for tech companies like Illumina, Facebook, Google. They pay to have women's eggs frozen. So of course they're gonna. So that's a luxury service. But having taken care of your parents, you could say that's a necessity, especially. So targeting adult users at adult family members, kids who are working at tech companies, and offering that as a benefit, that's like definitely an option. So there's all these options for B2B, like enterprise sales, for channel partnerships, but we need to get that core group of dedicated, loyal users in a direct-to-consumer way.
Right.
So we eventually want to sell only to other businesses or even assisted living or like organizations, so B2B. But in the beginning, how do you really get the grassroots?
You got to get that first 100 customers, right?
And that's why we narrowed it down to something that's very acute, very overlooked, and where it's not as price sensitive. So
fantastic, and that's such a focused niche. So compliments on that. That's fantastic.
I do have I think it's interesting you mentioned that because we meet with Brad and James every week, and we because they're our co-founders. And one of the things that really relevant points that was brought up is, hey, that's a little bit different market than we were going after. Definitely the SOM is not going to be as big.
Right.
Let's just say in San Diego it's a couple million. But we say, look, don't worry about having the startup look like a perfect company from the beginning. Let's make 100 customers
Yeah.
in San Diego, really super happy, and then we scale. But don't scale before you have legs, right?
Right.
Don't scale with a lukewarm product, because it's if you're making a community and a forum where you're like, hey, come, and we like, for a forum for people who like drone photography. That's great, but they're gonna drop off when there's something else, right? Because they're price sensitive and they're choice sensitive. But that's a community where you don't have to have people obsessing about the product or the service. It's a nice to have, but I'd rather have 10 people love our product and it's a necessity for them in their lives, and have a normal price point but not be so price sensitive, and then we expand because then we know we're solving a real pain point. And that was that was a shift from what the original vision started with, but it's just that we're pushing the original vision a little bit further into the future, and we're saying, and also scaling up takes a lot of money. So we're being very, so it was very strategic. It's like financial, all the things considered. Let's only grow. Don't push the child to grow before it's ready, right? Like is it a musical prodigy? Do they want to be MD, PhD? Do they want to be a startup founder? But once they have that, once they're a teenager, they're gonna go through their own growth spurt. But don't push them on steroids. And that was at least with my team, we're very focused and protective about that strategy. And so far it's, I don't know, so no guarantees, but we have a lot of confidence that strategy is the smartest one. It's the smartest.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And focusing on a niche is such an important thing. Usually, when you talk to entrepreneurs, especially first-time entrepreneurs, what do they say? Well, I want to conquer the world, right? And you the fact that you guys are staying away from that from the beginning is fantastic. Sorry, were you going to add something?
No, that's all. And Jeff Bezos, we all know what Amazon does. We all it's part of our lives. And Jeff Bezos started off by selling CDs and books online, not because he wanted to stay there and rest there, but because of a practical reason. Books and CDs were regular in size and weight, and you could predict how they're shipping. There's no size. It's not like, small, or large, extra large, whatever, with clothing. He just wanted to see if people are willing to buy without looking and browsing. That was his core hypothesis, and now look at Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. So that's fantastic that you guys are following the same model. So let's talk more specifically about the product that you're developing and how your sort of go-to-market strategy, how you're developing that. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so our product is a digital consult service through video, and our first product is actually just a website. And we are charging subscription membership. We call it the Well and Fit membership. And for that membership, they get access to 3 service verticals. The membership is tiered in different prices. They can do just fitness at home, and that's just like a group fitness class. They can do one-on-one consults with a health coach, or if they have a referral from a doctor for a physical therapist, we can do physical therapy consults as well. So there is some part that is a little bit harder to scale, and I'm just going to address that up front. But we have other ways to make that a little more scalable. So let's take physical therapy, for example. That's probably the least scalable, but the most sort of one of the most niche of our verticals. If you stay with a client, a physical therapist stays with a client for let's say a couple of months, the initial consult is for assessment, but for a lot of the movements, you can film that into a video and create a content library. And that format for providing concierge wellness and rehabilitation services, but in a more scalable format, hasn't really been explored. There are some companies who are transitioning into that, but that's the thing with legacy companies. It's like they start off with in-person, just regular office visits, and it's a little bit harder when you're not digital native, or what I like to call COVID native. So there's been a lot of challenges in COVID, and because of that, we actually wanted to make our MVP all digital at first, but still retain that white glove service feeling.
Right, that's fantastic, and I almost look at COVID as an advantage for you guys, because you're now developing a platform with a completely different mindset. In 2019, if someone was starting the same project, they would have a totally different mindset. So kudos to you guys on that. So what does the next 6 months look like? I'm guessing you'll be out with your MVP, you'll be signing up customers. So walk me through that timeline now.
Yeah, so as soon as our MVP is up, which is actually our plan, we plan it for it to be up before Thanksgiving in November. In parallel, we're actually exploring channel partnerships. And as I said, we want to do direct to consumer, but we realize that a lot of assisted living have had to cut back on their own services and wellness services because they're so crunched due to COVID and understaffed. But that doesn't remove the need for wellness services, and especially the residents now are even more isolated. So we are actually exploring sort of a hybrid business model. There's individual signups from our own networks, but we want to go to assisted living and senior retirement homes. The difference between assisted living is that they have more services. It's not just a zip code where a certain population lives, but senior retirement centers are more just like facilities and buildings, but without any services, and it's just a residence. So those two places are our prospective channel partnerships. We want to go to them and say, hey, what was your budget for wellness and enrichment services for your residents before? We know you're flooded, you probably had to make budget cuts. What if we can deliver that same enrichment, those same services? You don't have to vet the vendors, you don't have to establish your platform, you don't have to make the calls, you don't even have to do the scheduling. And what if we can meet your previous budget or go underneath it and give you a bulk discount? Because even if we give them a bulk discount, and there's some details in financial projections, but even if we give them a bulk discount for, let's say, 10 or 20 people, that sales strategy is you sell once, you get 10x your return. So, obviously it's much more effective than direct to consumer. And that will give us, since we're not selling one-off classes, we're selling the membership. So the whole thing is about having some kind of sustainable revenue as soon as possible. So if you want to talk about our financial goals, I want to have 100 customers on our platform from both channel partnerships and direct-to-consumer marketing by December 31st of this year. And I actually want to have a very healthy revenue stream such that we actually replace all of our own costs by sometime mid next year. So we're going so we are gonna fund, and we are a venture-backed startup, but at the same time during COVID there has been, if you look at Y Combinator, they actually decreased the amount of funding is to right size for the market. So we are strategizing for the market, and it's not to say in the first couple months we're going to look like a small business before we look like a startup. But that's intentional and that's normal. Because once you start burning the fuel and you start scaling and you start buying your customers, I truly think that's only allowed between 2014 and 2018. Right. It's not allowed right now, unless you're like Travis Kalanick, the Uber guy. Yeah. He's starting with cloud kitchens, but he's a three-time entrepreneur. He has so much resources and deep pockets. If you're a first-time entrepreneur, you need to be so sure, and there's nothing more sure than revenue. I mean, if we can become profitable or close to it before we raise our next round of seed funding, it's better for everyone, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that sort of proves not only your concept, but also your go-to-market strategy, because now not only are you cash flow positive, or at least zero burn, which is amazing for investors, and now the money you are taking in is for growth.
That's what exactly, right? And that's where I want. So traditionally, venture capital was like that before. So between 2016, 2018, there's a lot of inflation, and I think WeWork is the poster child of that. And don't become and SoftBank Vision Fund, their investors are not happy. You think the LPs are happy? It looks sexy at first, right? It made TechCrunch, Tech News, whatever, all those tech news. But would you rather have a 10x return? Would you rather be in TechCrunch? It's like that. So I know that, and that thinking was not that commonplace before COVID. It's becoming more commonplace right now, but it's still catching on. And I think it's reverting back to what venture capital was supposed, like the nascent stages of venture capital, where it was only, you usually self-fund with your own savings. There's nothing wrong with that, right? There is a risk. But you only take VC when at key inflection points. And we're really, I guess, reverting to the OG model of venture capital, but it works. It works in normal economic situation where you're not ballooning, right?
No, absolutely. This is such a fantastic story, and I can't wait for you guys to really get your legs and start scaling. I love the concept and love what you guys are doing with this. Any parting thoughts? I want to sort of wrap this up and just want to make sure we tie everything up with a nice
Yeah,
bow.
I would say Launch Factory has been such an incredible co-founder and partner and investor. I really want to compare that with the coach and athlete example. In competitive sports, Michael Phelps does not get to the Olympics, or Michelle Kwan doesn't get to. I think she was an ice skater.
Right.
Don't quote me. Yeah, she's a very famous ice skater,
Yeah.
and without at least a team of coaches. And I think it's the same for entrepreneurs, but nobody ever doubts the athlete's innate ability if they are seeking out for a coach. So I would say for me, at least personally as a co-founder, I was seeking for an ecosystem and a coach. And I did have an opportunity to join as an early scientist to a Y Combinator funded company. I wasn't a founder, but I had that opportunity. That would be a little bit percentage equity and all that.
Yeah.
But I didn't. And so there's a lot of other incubators and opportunities out there. But I would say, for any founders who are like watching this, a lot of incubators are great at helping you go from 1 to nth. But as Peter Thiel says in his book, 0 to 1, how do you go from 0 to 1?
Yeah.
And Launch Factory is the co-founder to help you do that. So
Fantastic.
Yeah,
No, thank you so much for the interview and taking the time today. I really appreciated the conversation, and I appreciated all of the insights that you shared with us. Thank
cool.
you.
Thank you so much, Deval.
That was great. Thank you so much to Yilan for coming on the show today and doing the interview with me. I really appreciated learning her life story, and just can't wait to see what she can achieve with Simply Independent. If you have any questions for Yilan, my email address is on screen. Please feel free to forward them to me. I'd be happy to facilitate that conversation. Having said that, this brings our 6-part series to a close. I want to thank everyone at Launch Factory for participating, for spending the time with me and giving me an opportunity to learn about the individual portfolio companies as well as Launch Factory as a whole. I am very excited about Launch Factory and what they will achieve in the coming months. I'm excited to be part of that journey as an investor and seeing what they can achieve on the financial end as well. If you are interested in joining Launch Factory on this journey, my email address is on screen. Please email me and let me know that you're interested, and I'd be happy to facilitate that conversation with Brad or James or whomever you're interested in speaking with, and make sure you have the opportunity to join the network also. Once again, I want to thank you for being part of this journey, and I look forward to continuing the conversation in the next interview. Thank you so much. Bye.